perhaps which may something that may be even sadder than just the shahadat of Imam al-Askari after salatu wasalam is often our lack of knowledge about this Imam. In fact, some of the youth or some individuals have said to me that, yes, we hear a lot about our former Imams, of course, Imam Ali bin Abi Talib, alayhi wasalam, and of course, Imam Hussein. We are just coming out of this period of mourning the Shahadat of Imam Hussein. We hear about Imam Sadiq. Of course, he had many students, and there are plenty of riwayat about or from Imam Sadiq alayhi wasalam. However, some have stated that when we get to some of the latter Imams, particularly perhaps after Imam Rida alayhi wasalam, when we begin to speak about Imam Jawad, or about Imam al-Hadi, or Imam al-Askari, we say that, well, we haven't heard much about these Imams, or we don't know a great deal about these Imams. And so that means that we need to, one, ourselves read more about these Imams, and on the other hand, examine their lives very thoroughly, because many of these latter Imams, and also particularly Imam Hassan al-Askari, that during his time he was under immense amount of pressure. That he was one of the Imams, and just so you understand the magnitude of the oppression at his time and what he had to deal with. Of course, it should be clear that what his primary mission was as well. His primary mission was, again, to be the father of Imam Zaman, the final Imam, the awaited one, the one that the Prophet of Allah ﷺ stated that he will come at the end of time, even if there's only one day left, in order to establish justice in the earth. And so this was the primary mission of Imam Hassan al-Askari, to make sure that this Imam will be born and to make sure that this Imam will be protected, because those who followed the Ahlul Bayt were not the only ones waiting for this Imam to come, waiting for this Imam to appear. Of course, those who perhaps believe, like you and I, is that we were waiting for the Imam so that he will establish justice upon the earth, so that he will remove the corruption that had rose up in the earth, and it still exists to this time. So our awaiting was one of hopefulness, one of rejoice that if this Imam comes, then inshallah, then justice will prevail and injustice will subside. But there were those who were waiting for the Imam in order to kill the Imam. Because these individuals, they knew what the Prophet had stated. They understood the prophecy that this Imam will come, this person will come, and he will establish justice. But by him establishing justice, all of those who are oppressors, those who are tyrants, or who their actions were unjust, that for them, at least in their minds, was, well, we'll lose out. Because we cannot maintain our reign of terror and tyranny. We cannot continue to usurp the wealth of the masses, to keep the people enslaved, whether physically or mentally, consciously. So they were waiting as well. So the primary responsibility of Imam Hassan al-Askari was to ensure that the Imam al-Hujjah al-Faraj al-Sharif, that he will be born and that this Imam will be safe from the oppressors and their plots. And so this meant that the interaction of the Imam, and this, again, to understand the magnitude of what he was doing, this meant that this interaction with those who are rejoicefully waiting for the Imam to be born, that the interaction with Imam Hassan al-Askari was very limited with many of the masses. Because he had to make sure that the Imam Zaman would be born and he was safe. And according to some accounts of history, Imam Hassan al-Askari alayhi wasallam, that roughly about twice a week, and this is perhaps during the time of Mu'tamid or either Mu'tadi or Mu'tamid. Imam Hassan al-Askari lived during the time of three Khulafa, Mu'taz, Mu'tadi, and Mu'tamid. Perhaps during the latter times it was very difficult, but perhaps in between the second and the third, they said that the Imam, he would come and he would be seen in the public at least about twice a week. But look at how his interaction was. That Imam Imam Askari alayhi, he told those individuals, again, who he knew, and these are my followers. These are the people who are, again, they're in line with the Ahlul Bayt alayhi. And not those among those who perhaps respected the Imam as a learned person, because you had a group like that as well, that perhaps they followed the Imams up until Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq, some followed the Imams up until Imam Rida alayhi, some followed the Imams up until Imam al-Hadi. But those individuals who recognized Imam Hassan al-Askari as the 11th Imam, and who will be the father of the 12th Imam, even though twice a week or so he would come out and he will be among the people, again, not directly interacting with them, he would tell them, he would say, do not give salams to me. That if you see me, don't give me salams. If you see me, he says, don't even point towards me. Or show an expression as if you know me or if you're recognizing me as the Imam. Now imagine this. Imagine that, again, that those who love the Imam or are passionate about following the Imam, that they can see their Imam, but they can't show that this is my Imam. This is the one who I follow. They cannot freely interact with the Imam. SubhanAllah, what? Oppression. Even some of the Imams beforehand, let's take even Imam Rida alayhi, yes, that he was under constant watch of Ma'mun and people around him, but nonetheless, those who were the Shias of the Imam, they interacted with him. They spoke with him. They showed that, yes, this is my Imam. But Imam Hassan al-Askari says the time was so difficult that don't even show that you are my follower. This is because if you do, then your life is in danger. So this also brings us to one of those points that if we really examine the life of Imam Hassan al-Askari in every moment, in every interaction, again, he's educating us. He's showing us that, yes, there's a time in which you have to realize that what is important. Is it important for me to show and express my love for the Ahlul Bayt, or is it important to protect the mission of the Ahlul Bayt, which is the mission of Rasulullah, which is the mission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even the Imam Hassan al-Askari, when he was telling his companions, he says, don't show that you are my followers. Even he told them, he says, even if you hear someone disrespecting me or saying something bad or negative about me, he says, if you hear it, and you walk away. You just leave, walk. Don't even show that you're upset by this. SubhanAllah. And again, to understand the magnitude of this, just think about, in just these past months as we're expressing our love for Imam Hussein. We're crying for the martyrdom of Imam Hussein. But Imam Hassan al-Askari says, no, Don't even show this. Because your life is in danger. And what's important at this moment is that mission. Is that Imam al-Hujjah should be born, he should be protected, and it should be known that he is the Imam after me, and those who are the followers, my followers, that they connect with this Imam. So Imam Hassan al-Askari, he is educating us about the time. And being very astute to when is the moment to express yourself, when is the moment to not express yourself. And this is why we see that also in the ziyarat of Imam Hassan al-Askari, and inshallah, hopefully we will recite that after the majlis. Of course, usually on Thursday night we recite ziyarat al-Waratha, but I think we should recite ziyarat of Imam Hassan al-Askari. Again, this is a part of connecting with this Imam. We say that we don't really know much about the Imam. Again, there are ziyarats for the Imam. Read those ziyarat and understand who your Imam is. And part of that ziyarah, it says that we say that the Imam, دعوت إلى الله بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة. That you call towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with wisdom and the best advice. One of them is this, what we mentioned, that as a follower of the Imam, you must have that wisdom, you must have that understanding when, again, to express yourself, and when at times that you see that, no, what's important at this moment is to safeguard the way of Rasulullah, to safeguard the Quran, to safeguard that mission of Ahlul Bayt. Every moment and every time is not to be Hussein yet. Sometimes you have to be an Askari. You have to be wise. This is the hikmah, this is the wisdom of Ahlul Bayt. Imam Hassan al-Askari, and to show you another one of his wisdoms, inshallah, that we can definitely make use of. Now, Imam Hassan al-Askari, even under this immense amount of oppression and this circumstance, he had about 200 so some students. And these were only the close, very close companions of the Imam. And even at that time, how he taught them and how they actually learned from the Imam is in and of itself, again, because they understood the method of Ahlul Bayt alayhi. In these two occasions, so when the Imam, he would come out, and they say that he would sometimes be summoned to the council, the court of the Khalifa at the time, or he will be summoned somewhere. At that time they set it up in Samara. And between, according to some, they say between his home or between the place where he was actually imprisoned and where he had to go, it was a short distance. But the Imam, he would take the longer route. And why would he take the longer route? Again, so that he would have more time, and in that period that he's taken a longer route, he would say things would be discussed, and those who were companions of Imam, they would listen, they would hear, they would write these things. Times he would correct different concepts of ideology, of theology, Quran, different tafsirs of the Quran. And this is why there's a tafsir that is probably a tafsir mansub, or which is attributed to Imam al-Hasan al-Askari. Some of you may know about. And this is because those individuals who took the Imam as their Imam, who recognized the Imam as al-Askari as their Imam, as he's talking, as he's interacting, they're writing, and they're learning, they're educating. So that means, what? What do we learn from this? This is one of the advice that, beautiful advices that even Ayatollah Bahjat, he gave to one of the students. He says, always keep with you a pad and a pencil. Pencil and a piece of paper, something to write on. And so that when you hear something that is wise, or you hear something that you are learning, he says, write it down. Write it down so that you don't forget it. And if we don't have that pen and paper, at least we maybe have our smartphones and we can type it in. So make sure that you have something that, oh, I can type this in, or I can save this, so that I remember. This is the method of Ahlul Bayt alayhim afdalus salatu wassalam. One of the things, this is one of the things I just want to kind of emphasize, something, again, another point that we can learn from Imam Hassan al-Askari alayhi afdalus salatu wassalam. Something that we can benefit from the teachings of Imam Hassan al-Askari, that we can implement in our lives, and perhaps it will give us a connection with the Imam, something that, yes, that we won't forget the Imam for, and something we can hand down into the next generation, our children, so that this idea or this concept, or what I've heard from many youth, they say, oh, well, we don't know much about Imam Hassan al-Askari. So yes, his life was difficult. He was under immense amount of oppression, surveillance. But even with that, he was able to educate people. Even like one of the guards who was sent to guard him, Ali ibn al-Tamish, his name is, that who was very much, at one point, an enemy of Ahlul Bayt. But his interaction, again, he was one of the folks that were set to watch the Imam, to imprison him, who was harsh against the Imam. But as he interacted with the Imam, this individual became one of the followers of the Imam. It says he became one of the greatest followers of the Imam. To the point that the Khalifa had to remove him from the house of the Imam, or remove this individual from guarding him. He says, oh, no, he's become a follower. So you remove the Imam and put him into a different imprisonment and under different surveillance. But one of the things that is narrated from the Imam Hassan al-Askari, various du'as. Again, you see how the Imam, again, uses the methods of some of the other Imams. Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi afdalus salatu wassalam. That he used dua as his method of teaching. And we see this also in the method of Imam Hassan al-Askari and many of the other Imams as well, and the Prophet himself. One of the du'as that I want to speak about, or at least a part of it, that will lead us to another aspect of one of the recommended actions, or a'mal, that the Imam he stated he gave to his followers. So dua, and in that dua, what struck me is just a part of it. It begins where the Imam he states, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. He's supplicating to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Kabira kulla kabir. The one who is great and exalted. He's greater than any greatness. So if anyone thinks that they're great, that they have some sort of maqam, when you stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know that no one has nothing. Ya kabira kulla kabir. Ya man la sharika lahu wa la wazir. That individual who has no partner and he has no wazir, he has no emissary. He doesn't need an emissary. He doesn't need anyone. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ya khaliq al-shams wal qamar al-munir. The one who has created the sun and the illuminated moon. Ya ismat al-khaif al-mustajir. The one who is the protector of the one who fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and who seeks help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is this point which, as I was reading this dua, it kind of stood out to me. That the Imam, again, at least for those who are his followers, those who are his Shia, like ourselves, inshallah, that he is giving us the cornerstone of what our actions should be, our a'mal should be, or at least a goal that we should have as servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ya ismatan khaiful mustajib. The isma, we say infallibility or impeccability. It is something that some of the scholars of akhlaq and spirituality, they say that, yes, we can perhaps capture an aspect or a dimension of isma. We're not going to go into all the aspects and dimensions of isma, infallibility, impeccability, but correcting ourselves and coming into the protection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whereby we protect ourselves, or by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's guidance, His help, that we protect ourselves from falling into sin. And how do we do that? Ya ismatal khaiful mustajib. That protection from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes if we have these qualities, that if we are fearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that we are seeking the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi wasallam, he says in one of his du'as, he calls out to Allah, Ya muntaha khawf al-abidin. The goal of the servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to have that fear from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not fear anything else. And this is a fear which, yes, that servant doesn't fear anything in this world. No materialism, nothing. Doesn't fear that something will be taken away from him. Doesn't fear that, doesn't fear death. Looks forward towards that death and to meeting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Doesn't fear imprisonment. Imam Hassan al-Askari, he was imprisoned. Many of the other imams, they were in prison. Again, standing on what is right, by living by what is right. That if one lives in that manner, that I'm living according to the Quran. I'm living according to the Sirat of Rasulullah and the Ahlul Bayt, the way of life of the Prophet and his Ahlul Bayt, then there's no need to fear. As those who are the Khulafa during the time of Imam Hassan al-Askari, and if we read the history, and why were they waiting for the Imam? And they wanted to do away with the Imam? Again, the history is very clear. Perhaps they assumed that this was the end of times for them. Because around that time as well, there was the Abbasid civil war. The Abbasids were actually fighting each other, at each other's throats. The Turks who had put Mu'taz, and this is the first Imam that Imam Hassan al-Askari he lived under, the first Khalifa that Imam Hassan al-Askari lived under, the Turks who had put Mu'taz in power now began to uprise against the Abbasids, to claim their own stake in the power structure of the Islamic Ummah. So the Turks began to uprise, and some of the slaves began to uprise. And of course, when you go further out into what was considered the Muslim lands, then you saw all of these other uprisings in North Africa. Then you had, some of the Fatimids, the Ismailis, the Shia governments rising up. Sicily around that time had begun to fall under the control of the Muslims. So there was all of these things that was going on, and of course, right there in Baghdad, you had the civil war and the Abbasids, those who claimed to be loyalists of the Abbasids, turning on one another. So they perhaps very well could assume that, this is a sign of the times, things are falling apart. And at this time that things are falling apart, here's the 11th Imam, and he's going to give birth to the 12th Imam, and then, we're done. So they feared this loss of power. They feared these things, their materialism, their maqam. And what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says about this, He says, إِنَّمَا ذَلِكُمُ الشَّيْطَانِ يَخَوِّفُ أَوْلِيَاءَهُ. This is the shaitan that makes those who he has power over and authority over to fear. to fear loss of their station, their wealth, their materialism. And Allah says, وَخَافُونِي إِن كُنْتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. إِن كُنْتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. He says, but fear me. Allah says, fear me, fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you're believers. And this is, again, it's a fear of losing one's connection and relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To fear to be severed from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His mercy, His rahmah, that we stray from the path of the Quran, of Rasulullah, and His Ahlul Bayt. So therefore, we must strengthen our iman and our faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, we must, again, cleanse ourselves from our sins. Ya ismatan khaifil mustajib. By doing so, that we acquire those qualities of being fearful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, being those who seek the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and entering into that protection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as some of the scholars of Irfan and Khalaq say, is ismatun kasbiyya, an acquired perfection. But after working on ourselves, understanding our shortcomings, and removing those things. And one of the gems that Imam Hassan al-Askari, he has provided for us, and is, again, you may say that that dua is part of theory. He's saying, oh, the one who is protected under Allah's protection, that person who is fearful, who is seeking the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is under Allah's protection. But then he gives us a very practical way of trying to come into that fold, of acquiring that acquired perfection, cleansing ourselves. And this is what he tells to some of his companions, is recorded in Jamal al-Usbu', one of the books written by Sayyid ibn Tawus. There's recorded that Imam Hassan al-Askari, he told some of his companions, he says, on Tuesday, Yawm al-Thulatha, he says, do this action. And again, I think that if we can't do it immediately, and hopefully we are writing these things. I see one person with his smartphone open, perhaps he's writing it, and then record it so that it can be done. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us tawfiq for that. This is on Tuesday, Yawm al-Thulatha. And if we are busy during our week, I'll give you a date that you can perhaps even do this. I'm sure most of you may not be working. You'll be free Tuesday in roughly about a month and a few weeks. Why? Because that's Christmas Day. Who's working? No one? Good. So on Tuesday, December 25th, you can do this action. And you can prepare for this action. How can you do that? So Imam, he says that on Tuesday, if you stand, you make 6 rak'ah. And of course, these are, as the Muslim rak'ahs go, 2 by 2. Just like Salatul Fajr, you pray 2 rak'ahs, you finish that. You pray 2 rak'ahs, you finish that. You pray another 2 rak'ahs, you finish that. 6 rak'ah. And in each of these rak'ahs, each of these units, you recite Surah Al-Fatiha. Thereafter, you recite verses 285 and 286 of Surah Al-Baqarah. This is, I began with verse 285 in my beginning remarks, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون. That Allah, that the Prophet of Allah, the messenger, he believes and he accepts what has been revealed to him, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and so do the mu'mineen. كُلٌّ آمَنُوا بِاللَّهِ وَمَلَائِكَتِهِ وَكُتُبِهِ وَرُسُلِهِ. All of these, and the emphasis that they believe, again, the aqidah. And we'll come back to that. So you recite Surah Fatiha, you recite these 2 verses, the last 2 verses of Surah Baqarah, and then thereafter you recite Surah Al-Zilzal. Right? إِذَا زُلْزِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ زِلْزَالَهَا. So you recite these three in each unit, and then you finish. Imam Hassan al-Askari, he said that once a person recites this, it is, at the end of that salah, it is as if their entire slate has been wiped clean. That they become, again, at a point, their amal, their deeds, become wiped clean, as if they were born, just born. Again, when a person is born, he has no sin. The person has no belief. So Imam Hassan al-Askari, he's giving us a practical way, again, to begin on that path of purification, to become those servants that make our goal that fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to fear, to sever ourselves and disconnect ourselves from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ya ismat al-khaif al-mustajib. We pray these 6 rakats, Surah Al-Fatiha, last 2 verses of Surah Al-Baqarah, and Surah Al-Zilzal. Just for a moment, I want to focus on these last 2 verses of Surah Al-Baqarah. We don't have much time to focus on that much, and perhaps maybe Saturday when we celebrate the Imamat of Imam Hujjah, maybe I'll talk about that a little bit more. But these 2 verses, according to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says they are a treasure, a ganj, al-kanz. Ganj is in Farsi and Arabic kanzun. And just a summary without going into detail because of lack of time. And the first, again, as that individual who is striving to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one of the most important things is, again, to have one's faith and iman on track. To believe, and actually to strive to believe as Rasulullah believed. Of course, his iman is far greater than ours, but nonetheless, we follow that path. Kullun amanu billah. That if you're a believer, and subhanAllah, if you someone who knows Arabic, this verse is very particular. It's very interesting that how it changes. It says that all of them, the believers, the Prophet Rasulullah, they believe in Allah and His angels and His books and all of the prophets. Then it switches from third person that they believe to what? To first person plural. لا نفرق بين أحد من رسوله. In other words, that if you're reading this or if you're engaging in it, consider yourself among the believers. You must put yourself in that position that you are among the believers. That this is what the believer should believe, and then you should be, and you should strive to be among those. لا نفرق. So first you're talking, oh, well, yes, they believe, but we don't separate. Meaning that come into the folds of Iman as you should come into the folds of Iman. And they say, in other words, and you should be saying as well, Sami'na wa ata'ana. That we've heard you, we've heard your call, we've heard your message in the Quran, we've heard and we obey. And then after that, after you say that, you seek also غفرانك يا رب غفرانك ربنا إليك المصير وإليك المصير, that our goal, our objective is to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thereafter, Allah says, He says, وَلَا يُكَلِّفُ اللَّهُ نَفْسًا إِلَّا وُسْعَهَا. And know that whatever you are dealing with, all your challenges in life, life is a journey. You're going to have challenges. But Allah, He only tries you and tests you with that which you can handle. It may seem very insurmountable as we look at it, but if you have faith, you have love, you won't fear. If someone standing in front, لا تخافوهم Don't fear it. وَخَافُونِ. Fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fear disconnecting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. After that, there's a very beautiful dua in this part of the surah, and again, I'm just going quickly because of time. This is one of the du'as that one of my teachers, he would always recite in Qunut. And I always thought it was great, but if you understand the magnitude of these verses, even at one point, the Prophet of Allah, he says that if you have these two verses, if you're reciting these two verses, often he says, kafak is sufficient for you. Again, not simply reciting them and not having any reflection upon them and understanding them. No, reciting them and understand what these verses contain. And when we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the beginning part of that dua, رَبَّنَا لَا تُؤَاخِذْنَا إِن نَسِينَا أَوْ أَخْطَأْنَا. To Allah, that if we've forgotten or if we've made a mistake, then don't hold it against us. And by the end of it, you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَاغْفِرْ لَنَا وَاعْفُ عَنَّا وَاغْفِرْ لَنَا وَارْحَمْنَا. You're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for af, to remove your sins, to disconnect you from your sins. وَاغْفِرْ لَنَا, to erase those sins from my soul. Not simply disconnect me from it, erase those from my soul. وَاغْفِرْ لَنَا وَارْحَمْنَا, and then place upon your mercy, your guidance, your favor. SubhanAllah, this is the teachings of our Imam. The Imam that we should be connecting with. The Imam that, despite all of the difficulties that he had to deal with, he made such an effort to give us this treasure of how to cleanse ourselves. But more importantly, he gave us the treasure of the Imam of our time, the Hujjah of our time, that we need to connect with. The one that time that, again, those few companions that Imam Hassan al-Askari had, that he made sure that this Imam, he was known among them, that they can deliver to us also the good tidings that this Imam was born, that this Imam is the Imam of your time. This is the Imam that we need to connect to. One of the individuals by the name of Abu Ismail Ibn Ali al-Nawbahti, who said that he was at the house of Imam Hassan al-Askari on a night like this. The night in which the Imam, he was at the peak of suffering from the poison that he had been given. He said that there were basically two individuals who were there with the Imam. One servant by the name of Aqid, who's in the service of Imam Hadi, now in the service of Imam al-Hassan al-Askari, and Saqid, or Narjis, the wife of Imam Hassan al-Askari. They said at one point, as the Imam, he is going in and out of consciousness, as he is suffering from the poison that he had been given, and according to some accounts, it had been 10 days as the Imam, he is going through this difficult period. He asks Aqid, he says, Ya Aqid, take some water and boil the water for me, and put some mastak in the water as you boil it. This is a very natural gum that is taken from trees. He says, put that in water and boil it for me, and bring it to me. It said that Aqid, he boiled this water and he then brought it, he handed it over to Hazrat Narjis, and she took the water and gave it to Imam Hassan al-Askari. But as the Imam, he wanted to drink this water, that perhaps it would ease some of the pain that the Imam was feeling from the poison. They said that as the Imam, he brought this goggled as he brought this cup towards his mouth and he tried to drink it. It said it kept hitting his teeth. The point Imam, he realized that he cannot open his teeth. He cannot open his mouth properly simply to drink this water. So they said that Imam Hassan al-Askari, he called Aqid, Ya Aqid. That come into my home. So Tajid Bayt Sabiyan Sajidan. He says, when you come in, you'll see there will be a young boy who's in prostration. Tell him to come, bring him to me. So he said, Aqid, he came in. He looked at this young boy who was in prostration. This was the Imam al-Hujjah. He said, our master, Al-Hassan, he's calling you. He says, go to him. So he said, Imam al-Hujjah, he stood up and he went towards his father. He went towards his ailing father that he was lying, he was on his deathbed. He said that Imam al-Hassan, as he mumbled to him that, Isqani, Ya Sayyid Ahl Bayti, Isqani al-Ma, that, oh, Sayyid of my household, give me this water. Help me to drink this water. According to the Maqtal, it says that Imam al-Hujjah, he picked up the cup with one hand and he took it towards his father's lips, the lips of Imam al-Hassan al-Askari. And then he took the lips of Imam al-Hassan al-Askari with his other hand and began to open it and pour the water into the mouth of Imam al-Hassan al-Askari. Then look at the state of our Imam, the master of his time, that at this point that he's not able to give him all his own self a drink, that he had to call upon his son just to give him a little bit of water. And I would say that in this moment, that subhanallah, that how lucky and how fortunate Imam al-Hassan al-Askari was in this moment of his death. Because when you look at his grandfather Hussein ibn Ali on the plains of Karbala, that he had no one to come to give him water. But at least Imam Hassan al-Askari, that his son is there. His son has not become shaheed like Ali al-Akbar on the plains of Karbala. That the son of Imam al-Askari is there to help to give water to his father, his ailing and dying father. He said Imam al-Hassan al-Askari, as he drank the water, he looked at his son. He began to hug Imam al-Hujjah. He began to kiss the forehead of Imam al-Hujjah. And he began to cry. He began to tell Imam al-Hujjah, he says, Anta waladi wa wasi, that you are my son. You are the one who the reins of the imamate will go to after me. أنت ولدي أنت بن الحسن بن علي. You are the son of Hassan ibn Ali. وولدك رسول الله. And your grandfather, your father is Rasulullah. عظم الله أجور إمامنا. May Allah give our condolences to the Imam. They said that after these moments, after these words from Imam al-Hassan al-Askari, they said that we began to see the Imam begin to sweat. ثم عرق جبينا وسكن أنينا. That he began to sweat profusely. They said that this is a sign of death. When one begins to sweat, he began to sweat profusely. And his grunts and his mourning, his grunts from the pain of the poison begin to become softer and softer. Then the Imam, he passed away in the lap of Imam al-Hujjah. حسنا ومسموما. يا محمد يا ابن رسول الله يا أبا محمد يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه أيها الإمام الزكي العسكري إنا نتوجه إليك فاشفع لنا عند الله فاشفع لنا عند الله يا أيها الزكي العسكري اللهم اغفر ذنوبنا واستر عيوبنا واقضي حوائجنا واشفي مرضانا وارحم أمواتنا وعجل فرج مولانا صاحب العصر